So, here am I this morning with Clément Robert of the 2850 group of restaurants. He's in charge of all the wine selections and the wine program here. And I'm one of London's leading sommeliers, and I just want to ask him a few questions as to what really makes him tick. So I'm going to start, Clément, good morning.
Good morning.
Where and when were you born?
So I was born in Rouen, which is in Normandy. I grew up in Forges-les-Eaux, which is a small town near Rouen. But yeah, I was very much a Normandy guy.
Okay, so more with Calvados than wine, perhaps.
And cider, don't forget a cider.
Yes.
Exactly.
Cidre Normand.
Exactly.
Okay, so what and where was your first encounter with wine?
My first encounter with wine. At a very early age, my father has wine as a hobby. So he had always quite a big selection and a very decent cellar. And every weekend he would always bring me to the cellar from the age, I would say, 10. He would bring me to the cellar and explain me the label and teach me geography, talking about wine regions. So at a very early age, in fact, and they were also introduced me to the smell of wine, later on to the taste of wine, obviously. So yeah, very early.
Okay, so apart from him, who did you learn your craft from?
So I then went to Hospitality College in the north of France, in Le Touquet. At the time, it was considered like one of the best college for hospitality. So I had some very good teacher there. And from that, I really wanted to specialize myself and become a sommelier. So I essentially went to a sommelier school in Angers, in the Loire Valley. For me, it was important to go in a vineyard region. So Angers it was, and I found a wonderful apprenticeship in a restaurant called La Licorne, which is a Michelin star restaurant in Fontevraud-l'Abbaye, with one of the biggest Loire collection you could possibly imagine. That's really what hooked me to the world of wine.
Okay, so was that when you decided to become a sommelier?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I probably decided that before, during my time at Hospitality College, to be honest. But then I became a sommelier while being an apprenticeship.
Okay, and you're now a master sommelier. How significant was it for you to study to become a master sommelier?
It took me, altogether it took me about 10 years, because effectively I passed my sommelier degrees at 18 years old. And I became a master sommelier at 28 years old. And there was no stopping from the age of 18 to 28. There was no stopping when it comes to study, testing, and practical. So I very much, learned my craft over the years and step by step became a master sommelier.
Okay. So how would you describe your philosophy about wine, in particular in your present job?
Philosophy about wine. First of all, never forget that wine is simply crushed grapes that are fermented, bottled, and are designed to be consumed. That's my philosophy about wine. There is a lot of sort of complex aspects, and a lot of wine professionals like to make it sound even more complex. I like to make wine sound easy, and approachable, and relaxed, which for me is very, very important. When it comes to building a wine list or choosing wine, to me, you need to have a certain aspect of comfort for the consumer. Yes. Finding names that people can recognize, as well as introducing wines that people never tasted before. But to me, it's very important to have a balance. If you walk to a place and you only find wines that you never heard about before and are relatively obscure, I do think that people are at first feeling a bit uncomfortable about it. Yes. It's the same if I go to any sort of retail store. If all the brands which are there, I know nothing about them, I will feel uncomfortable. So I think it's important to have wine that people can recognize. We have Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, as well as some sort of a little bit more unusual, quirky wine, such as a blend from Catalonia based on Muscat, which is organic and biodynamic. But to me, the importance to have both wines side by side on our wine list really put the consumer at ease, and that's very important.
We've actually answered my next question, which was, what is your approach to compiling a wine list? But you mentioned organic and biodynamic. How important is that for you?
It is important, yet the biggest importance when it comes to choosing wine is the quality to me. If the wine is organic and biodynamic, it's a plus, then great. But the quality has to prevail. Too often, people are hiding behind the label of organic, biodynamic on produce wine which are below average,
yes.
sometimes unclean. And to me, it's very, very important
exactly.
that the quality is there.
Yes.
And if afterwards it's organic or biodynamic, then it's a plus and it's a selling point.
Yeah.
Then great, amazing.
Yeah.
My view on organic and biodynamic is if a producer make the effort to become organic and biodynamic, he's probably on the right track to make quality. Some producers are using it as a gimmick, but they are not a majority. But that will be my approach to biodynamic. If a producer really wants to make the effort to go through all the process in a vineyard, clearly he wants to make quality. But there are still accidents happening.
Yeah, I mean, I always seem to feel that there are some really good organic and biodynamic wines made in spite of the fact they're making a rod for their own backs.
Absolutely.
It's not the be-all and end-all. As you say, it's quality which counts in the first place, whether it's biodynamic or whether it's what somebody once described as factory wine. It's the same thing. What are the most important countries for you around the world to source wine? Is there any particular...
Because the nature of 2850 is one thing I haven't talked about when it comes to building our wine list. We try to be super good value for money. We have two different wine lists. One wine list which is, I would say, very easygoing with relatively inexpensive wine. And we got a second wine list where we call collector, which is what we consider as fine wine or premium wine. And I very much look at it almost as two different jobs. The job for our sort of more everyday type of wines, I try to be as eclectic as possible. The last thing I want is to have 60% French or 60% Italian. I try to have a fair representation of what the amazing wine culture in England is about. Having an Australian wine, a US wine, a New Zealandese wine, a French wine, an Italian wine, a Portuguese wine. Try to follow a little bit the trend without falling into the trap of having a wine which has to be there because it's trendy, but still always follow very, very closely the trends to make sure that the consumer, again, will find something that they heard about or they want to drink. And my second job is to source for a fine wine list, I will say. And there is very French orientated simply because so I'm 2 years in a job at 2850 on texture, and I came with fresh idea when I started. The wine list was very much French when I started. I came with new idea, but in fact I almost backtrack a little bit because I saw that our customers are really asking for very classic wines. And when I talk about classic wines, I'm talking about French, Italian, Spanish, a bit of US wine, a bit of Australian wines. So I kept that, still developing my idea, still bringing a bit of eclecticism and modernity to the list, but I very much kept it that way, in a way that we are very strong in Bordeaux, very strong in Burgundy and Champagne, and we are very strong in Barolo. We certainly developed that, but we are now stronger in Barolo, Barbaresco, Brunello de Montalcino, so all the top appellations from Italy. Rioja is also quite strong. We got few very good Ribera del Duero, but overall some very classic appellations. We try to distinguish ourselves by finding unique cuvées, unique vintages.
Sure. So you might say you consider that maybe as your perfect wine list? And if so, would that apply to all? Do you think that would apply to all types of restaurants?
Yes and no. I do think that the two wine lists combined are probably what I like doing. Is it the perfect one list? For me, it's probably is, because that's what I like to do, that's what I like to show to people. Can you roll it out in every restaurant? Yes, but you also need to tweak to the environment you have. The most important is to adapt to the environment you are. You are on counter. on the type of restaurant you are in. Can you put this sort of wine list in a Japanese restaurant? Maybe not. Can you put this wine list in a very, very fast-paced restaurant where we only buy some references, we only buy few bottles? Probably not. You will need something which is logistically perhaps a little bit more easy to run. Bear in mind we have 60 to 70 suppliers as well. So that creates a lot of work, both in terms of paperwork and logistic. So can you do it in a restaurant that does, let's say, 600 covers a day? Probably not. Probably not.
So what do you think would be the optimum number of bins you would have, different wines you would have in a restaurant?
It's difficult because your question is almost as you're asking a recipe, an ultimate recipe to make the perfect wine list in every restaurant. And it's a difficult question because every restaurant are unique. It depends. If I take the example of probably the most talked about restaurants when it comes to wine at the moment, which is 67 Pall Mall, their wine list is absolutely huge, and it works for them because they just want to have the greatest, the biggest collection of wine, and it makes sense. And a lot of people say, "Oh, it's too big." Well, not necessarily, because it fits their concept so well. In some other restaurant, they will have 5 wine, 5 red, 5 white wine, 5 red, 2 sparkling wine, because they just want to have that simplicity, and it works for them as well. Let's take the example of our group 2850. We have around 200 wines, which is, to me, it's a very decent sized wine list.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you with that.
You go to Texture, we have 600. Yet, I'm in charge of the wine program for both places. It makes sense at Texture because it's a Michelin star restaurant, it's gastronomic. People like to have a bit more choice. People like to plow through the wine list. It was deemed very old-fashioned about 5 years ago. It was almost a witch hunt against big wine lists from many journalists and definitely the press. The witch hunt was, those wine lists have to die. Big wine lists don't make any sense. And no, if I look at it, actually, it doesn't. It's like saying, oh, the Gavroche is too old-fashioned. Well, people like that. People like a bit of old-fashioned institution. And I think when it comes to big wine list, some people are feeling comfortable plotting through, looking at it, looking at the collection, and it makes sense in some establishment. On Texture, it definitely makes sense.
Okay. What's your opinion on restaurant markups?
That's a very difficult one, but it's an interesting one. I feel very comfortable talking about markup because the policy of our establishment is to create low markup. So obviously it's an easy one for me. The lower is the better for the consumer. We all understand that. No one wants to pay over the odds, whether it's in wine, whether you purchase a car, whether you purchase a shirt. We don't like to pay over the odds. We like to have the best value for money possible.
But sure. I mean, I've seen in one restaurant the other day, Cloudy Bay Sauvignon Blanc. I don't know what the wholesale price of that is. It was on the list at £80.
It's probably the price though. I think these days Sauvignon Blanc Cloudy Bay is around 20 plus £25 to buy.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a 300% or 350% markup. Let's say it doesn't shock me because I know that the establishment that does that or that do that are under pressure to do it because you get higher rent. The cost of staff is just becoming higher. Operating a restaurant, there are so many obvious costs, but so many hidden costs as well. And somehow you need to charge the consumer in order to have a profitable and a sustainable business.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the wine prices save a lot of restaurants. It's their
Absolutely.
Profit because preparing the food is so labour intensive. This, to be facetious, perhaps it's just pulling a cork. Maybe I'm oversimplifying that. And that leads me to the next question is, what are your views on the relationship between sommeliers and waiting staff in a restaurant?
I've got few. I mean, I've worked in different establishments, different standards with different teams, but it's one team. At the end of the day, it's only one team at the front of house.
Yeah.
And I like to extend it. It's only one team. It's a restaurant team. You know what I mean? That should include the kitchen, and the chefs. But in my view, the sommelier are there if they are needed. they shouldn't impose their presence on every table, which is often a mistake you see in many restaurants. What I'm trying to say is anyone to some extent should be able to take wine orders. The sommelier should only be there to make sure the wine service is driven to perfection. And the sommelier should only be there on request if the customer or the guest wants to speak to a wine specialist. In any case, the sommelier shouldn't be there to try to upsell on every opportunity,
Sure.
or try to impose his idea or opinions on every table. That to me is slightly wrong.
Okay. And so how do you see future trends in restaurant wine lists? Do you see wine lists going in one way or one direction?
I think we will see more and more diversity. We see more concept opening. I heard there will be a auction wine list in one of the restaurants opening in a city, where essentially the price will increase and decrease according to the demand during the evening. So there will be, we saw wine list on iPad, and it was deemed the next big thing about 5, 6, 7 years ago, and people actually didn't respond well to it at all. On the sort of iPad version died out a little bit. Again, 5 years ago, all the press was crying for smaller wine lists, or asking smaller wine lists. And now you see almost a reverse aspect where people want to have more choice on their wine list. So I do think that London is such a mature market, and England in general is such a mature market now, that diversity is there everywhere. We are on Maddox Street. You can have a typical French restaurant, a modern European restaurant. You have Umud on the road, which is a wonderful, Japanese restaurant. Hakkasan is not far away, which is Chinese. You got an Indian restaurant on Berkeley Square. There are so many opportunities, so many different food in one. I'm talking about 2 or 3 streets. Such a proximity.
All over London.
You have exactly, exactly. In your neighborhood, you will have that choice. You will have that sort of diversity. And why? I mean, one is will develop in different fashion, different aspects. The most important when it comes to a wine list is to make sure you have the basics for your consumer, the basic for your guest. That's I think.
Okay, it's great. And finally, in which direction do you see yourself going in the near future? Any ideas of opening your own restaurant, for example?
I had the idea. It definitely went through my mind. It did not happen at the time. It almost happened. It didn't happen. I think London is a very, very difficult market at the moment. I shelved the idea for the moment. I might come back to it, but I very much enjoy the position of being a wine buyer, and I really want to develop myself into that channel. Absolutely.
Okay, well, Clément, thank you very much for your frank answers to some of my perhaps not very clever questions, but thanks a lot, and
thank you,
I hope that my viewers and readers will enjoy what you have to say. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Neville.